History books rarely tell the whole truth. They soften conquest, polish brutality with scholarly language, and turn mass suffering into neat chapters and dates. But between 1206 and 1368, one empire made sure the world remembered its terror exactly as it was. The Mongol Empire did not simply expand across continents. It crushed resistance, erased cities, broke entire populations through fear, and transformed cruelty into a weapon more powerful than steel. In just 162 years, the Mongols created the largest contiguous land empire in human history. They spread from the Pacific to Eastern Europe, from the frozen steppe to the deserts of Persia, and their rule touched nearly 40% of the world's population. Historians estimate that around 40 million people died during their campaigns, a staggering number that made the Mongol advance one of the deadliest events in human history. But numbers alone cannot explain why entire cities surrendered before a single Mongol horseman reached their gates. The true secret of Mongol domination was not just speed, discipline, or military skill. It was psychological warfare so ruthless, so calculated, and so unforgettable that people were often defeated before the battle even began. The Mongols understood something most armies never did. If fear arrives first, victory becomes easier. At the Battle of Legnica in 1241, after defeating a coalition of European forces, Mongol soldiers crossed the field and cut the right ear from every corpse. Those ears were packed into 9 sacks, not as some chaotic act of battlefield savagery, but as a cold and organized report of death. It was violence reduced to accounting, horror made administrative. Survivors who saw those sacks understood that they were not facing ordinary warriors. They were facing men who could turn mutilation into routine procedure. In Central Asia and Persia, the Mongols proved that their war was not just against armies or kings, but against the foundations of civilization itself. Rather than merely burning villages and looting fields, they destroyed irrigation systems that had taken generations to build. These canals fed crops, sustained trade, and kept entire regions alive. Once the Mongols ripped them apart, the land withered. Farms died, famine followed, and once green regions turned into barren dust. They understood that you do not always need to kill every person with a blade. Sometimes it is enough to kill the land and let hunger finish the work. When they came to a city protected by thick walls and confident defenders, the Mongols did not always rush into battle. Often, they surrounded the city and waited. No road remained open. No food entered. No one escaped. Days became weeks, and weeks became months. First came hunger, then thirst, then disease. Desperation turned people inward. Families ate whatever they could find. Leather, rats, refuse, anything to survive a little longer. Streets filled with sickness. And when the gates finally opened, the people inside were already broken. Yet even then, surrender did not guarantee mercy. The Mongols wanted more than victory. They wanted memory. They wanted the next city to hear what happened and collapse in fear before the siege even began. Their punishments could be as symbolic as they were brutal. One Persian nobleman, captured during war, was reportedly covered in animal fat, wrapped tightly in felt, and left beneath the open desert sun. Unable to move, unable to escape, he slowly burned beneath layers that trapped heat against his body. Whether every detail of the tale survived exactly as told matters less than the lesson such stories carried across the region. Resistance would not bring a swift death. It would bring suffering designed to haunt the imagination of anyone who heard about it. The Mongols also remembered insults with terrifying patience. When Persian forces once captured Mongol prisoners and executed them in especially humiliating ways, the Mongols did not forget. They returned later, and when they did, their revenge was devastating. This was part of their power. They were not driven only by rage in the moment. They were strategic with vengeance. They stored fear like a weapon and released it when it would do the most damage. After capturing a city, they sorted human beings with the efficiency of a machine. Skilled craftsmen, engineers, and blacksmiths were spared, but only to be forced to cross vast distances to serve the empire. Young men of fighting age were often absorbed into Mongol campaigns, sometimes made to fight against their own people in the next battle. Others were enslaved, pushed into labor until exhaustion, starvation, cold, and disease destroyed them. To the Mongol war machine, a person was not always an enemy or subject. Often, a person was simply a resource. And resources, once broken, were discarded. During sieges, the Mongols mastered terror as performance. They catapulted severed heads over city walls so that defenders would look down and recognize the faces of neighbors, relatives, or allied soldiers from nearby towns. This was not done because it helped break stone. It was done because it helped break courage. The Mongols understood that once despair enters a city, walls stop mattering. And when severed heads were not enough, they escalated to something even darker. Diseased corpses were thrown over walls into crowded streets, poisoning air, water, and morale. Long before the modern world gave such tactics a name, the Mongols had learned how to turn death itself into a weapon that kept killing after the battle paused. In some campaigns, they weaponized nature with equal cruelty. At Yinchuan, when walls stood firm, they reportedly redirected water to batter the city. At Urgench, after resistance had already collapsed, floodwaters became another instrument of destruction. Water cares nothing for rank, innocence, or surrender. It drowns everyone the same way, and the Mongols understood how powerful that could be. Their cruelty was not limited to enemy soldiers. One of their most chilling tactics involved using civilians from previously conquered settlements as human shields. Women, children, and elderly people were forced to march ahead of the army during assaults, absorbing arrows and boiling oil that defenders hurled from the walls. Imagine the horror inside those cities. Defenders forced to strike through their own people just to reach the enemy behind them. It was cruelty wrapped in ruthless tactical logic. The Mongols made resistance feel morally unbearable as well as militarily hopeless. In some cities, mass killing was carried out with horrifying organization. At Urgench, chroniclers describe executions arranged almost like industrial labor, with soldiers assigned fixed numbers of prisoners to kill. At Nishaper, vengeance became so extreme that the slaughter entered legend. When a member of Genghis Khan's family was killed there, retribution was total. The city was annihilated, and afterward, pyramids of skulls were said to have been raised outside the ruins. Whether every number reported by medieval chroniclers is exact or exaggerated, the essential truth remains the same. The Mongols wanted those towers of bone to stand as advertisements of fear. They wanted travelers, merchants, and survivors to carry the image farther than any mounted messenger ever could. Long before Genghis Khan unified the steppe, violence was already woven into rival tribal politics. Jamukha, once Genghis Khan's ally and later his enemy, was remembered for boiling enemy commanders alive in massive cauldrons. Such stories matter because the Mongol world was built on reputation. A leader did not simply defeat his enemies. He shaped what people believed would happen if they opposed him. When Genghis rose above his rivals, he inherited not just warriors and territory, but an environment in which terror itself had political value. Even the Mongol rule against spilling noble blood could make death more horrifying, not less. Some executions avoided open bleeding for religious or symbolic reasons, leading to suffocation, crushing, or slow internal injury rather than swift beheading. Jamukha himself, once captured, was reportedly granted an honorable death without bloodshed, his back broken rather than his throat cut. Another enemy, Buri, was punished by having his spine snapped after a public humiliation involving wrestling and pride. In the Mongol world, even mercy could be excruciating. One of the most infamous scenes linked to Mongol warfare came after the Battle of the Khalkha River, when captured Russian princes were laid beneath wooden boards while Mongol commanders feasted on top of them. As the nobles beneath the planks were slowly crushed and suffocated, their conquerors ate, drank, and celebrated victory. The symbolism was unmistakable. These were not simply defeated rulers. They were being shown to the world as men so completely beneath Mongol power that their bodies could serve as furniture. It was not just execution. It was theater. And then came Baghdad. In 1258, Hulagu Khan led the Mongol assault on one of the most important cities in the Islamic world, a city of libraries, scholars, wealth, and memory. When it fell, the Abbasid Caliph was captured. According to tradition, he was wrapped in a carpet and trampled by horses so that his blood would not touch the earth. Around him, Baghdad endured catastrophe. Large portions of the city were destroyed, its people massacred, its centers of learning devastated. Later writers described the Tigris running black with ink from books thrown into the river and red with blood from the slain. Whether every image is literal or partly poetic, the collapse of Baghdad marked something enormous. The destruction of a capital that had stood for centuries as a symbol of power and knowledge. The Mongols did not merely win there. They made the world watch a civilization fall. And that is the key to understanding how they conquered so much, so quickly. The Mongols did not rely on terror by accident. They engineered it. They spread stories of punishment, displayed the remains of the dead, and made examples of cities, until rumor itself became one of their strongest allies. By the time their riders appeared on the horizon, many places had already heard enough to know what resistance could cost. This was psychological warfare in its purest and most devastating form. The sword mattered, the horse mattered, discipline mattered, but fear mattered more. Fear opened gates. Fear shattered alliances. Fear made defenders argue, hesitate, and surrender before the first assault began. Genghis Khan and the rulers who followed him did not conquer the known world simply because they were fierce in battle. They conquered it because they understood the human mind. They knew that if one city was annihilated publicly enough, 10 others might submit without a fight. If one king was humiliated brutally enough, neighboring rulers might send tribute instead of soldiers. If one capital was erased completely enough, entire regions would lose the will to resist. The Mongol Empire was built not only on horseback speed and battlefield coordination, but on a terrifying mastery of image, rumor, and memory. Their cruelty was not random. It was method. Their violence was not only destruction, it was communication. And that is why their name echoed across continents with such dread. Long after the armies passed, long after the dust settled, and long after the bones were buried or left beneath the sky, one lesson remained carved into the minds of those who survived. When the Mongols came, they did not just defeat you. They made sure the world never forgot what happened when you tried to stand against them.